Alright, I thought I'd do a little thought experiment going on about faith. So, I want to try and figure out what the deal is with faith using some good old fashioned reason and logic. So, what is faith? The definition that I could find was a religious or spiritual belief without evidence. So, we need to figure out what the different components of that mean. What is religion? A particular system of faith and worship. So these two are already referencing each other. You've got faith is a religious or spiritual belief without evidence, and religion is a particular system of faith and worship. So I think we can remove faith from that because it's self-referential. And so we end up with our original definition of faith with that integrated into it is a system of worship or spirituality without evidence. So what is spirituality? It is something relating to religion or religious belief, right? So again, it's circling back on itself, so we can just ignore that one because it just means religion, and religion is faith and worship. So we get rid of that, and it's just worship. So spirituality is worship, theoretically, if we're being logical. So now we have faith is a system of worship without evidence. That's plausible. Makes sense so far. You're worshipping something and you got no reason to worship it. So what is evidence? Evidence is the available body of facts or information indicating whether a belief or proposition is true or valid. So, if we plug that back into our definition, we end up with faith is a system of worship without the available body of facts or information indicating whether a belief or proposition is true or valid. So what does that mean? It means you are worshipping something. I guess I should have got the definition of worship. I'll do that just now. Worship is to show reverence and adoration, right? So, if we go back to our definition, it is to a system of reverence and adoration without the available body of facts or information indicating whether a belief or proposition is true or valid. So you're like holding something above everything else without all the information that is available for making that judgment. That makes sense. But what's interesting about this is that not only does it apply to religion, throwing a twist in there, it also applies to science. And this little thought experiment is a good way to prove that science is itself a religion, or at least faith-based, which a lot of people would argue makes it a religion because that's a particular system of faith and worship. So if it's faith-based, it is a religion if there's worship involved. So if you are holding it above everything else, if you are revering it, then you are worshipping it. So let's try and go through the motions here and see if science actually does meet these criteria. A system of worship. Do people worship science? I think that's obvious to everyone. I think the modern age does worship science. I think science has become such a big part of culture, and you've got so many people holding it above everything else, especially above other religions, that it's very hard to make the claim that we don't worship science, you know? Um, so that's step one. Is it a system of worship? Yes, it is. Next part, without the available body of facts or information indicating whether a belief or proposition is true or valid. Do we have the available body of facts or information? That is a trickier one. Some would say we do, because we can look back in time and we can see how science has progressed society. I would say the same is true of Christianity. So just advancing society is not necessarily proof that it is true, right? Especially when it comes to science, because the whole point of science is that we're constantly striving for the truth, but we can never quite reach it. No matter what we come up with, someone else in the future is going to come up with something that makes what we're doing look like total nonsense, right? To an extent. So I would argue that we do not have the available body of facts when it comes to science. I would say a lot of the time, possibly all of the time, we are relying on faith in the scientific method, which is based on past experiences, but it's not the full available body of facts. The reason I say that is technology is advancing constantly, which means that we never have the full body of facts, because otherwise we wouldn't be able to discover any more. So if that's the case, how can we say that we have evidence when we don't have all the facts? We have all the facts that we know of, but that doesn't make it evidence in the strictest terms, you know? If you're a Christian and you go to church every Sunday and you pray and it makes you feel good and you feel a connection to God or whatever, and it helps motivate you to do your life, you are going to say you have evidence that Christianity is real because it's actively affecting your life. You might not say it, but you could say it, you know? People could use prayer as evidence of God. If they prayed, that helped them start feeling better about themselves. Therefore, they started actually going through the motions and ended up getting what they were praying for. It can go both ways. You could pray and just go, well, that's that done. But this is where you start getting into the occult, where it's, you know, people say about the occult, not that I'm big on the occult, but I'm aware of this at least. People say you can't just cast a spell and then do nothing. You've got to cast a spell and then perform actions to get to where you want. Like if you were casting a spell to become a famous musician, you would at least have to take up music and start practicing and trying to get gigs, etc. So it's more a motivational kind of thing. And then they would swear, if they made it, that their spell had worked and that that was evidence for it. You see? So all the facts is a very interesting way of judging things, because you would say the Christians don't have all the facts, the crazy occult guys don't have all the facts, science doesn't have all the facts. We can all agree on that. It's making its way there, and it's definitely the best bet that we have, but it doesn't have all the facts. Otherwise there'd be nothing for scientists to do. So with that in mind, science meets all the criteria for the definition of faith in the same manner that religion does. And I think not accepting this can really cause people to become quite abrasive when discussing science. You get people who assume that the knowledge that they have gained from science is objective, as opposed to just the best guess that they have with the information they have. They treat it as if it's evidence, when it's not evidence. It's just strongly implied, you know? It's not evidence in the strict definition because we don't have all the facts. And evidence is all the facts, right? It's the available body of facts for a proposition. We just don't have it. And I think this misleading idea that science is not faith-based is actually causing it to become a new religion, I would say. I would say that in the same way that the church used to be the method of control for the population, I would say that over time, science has replaced that. And now, instead of priests, you have your scientists, who are the new priesthood. And if you can slip a scientist, a high-ranking scientist, some money and get them to say something, that is the same as going to a priest or a bishop or a cardinal or the pope and getting them to say something. It's the same dealio, but because people will not accept that science is a religion, they fall for it every time. That's the unfortunate thing. In their hunt for the truth, in their hunt for objective evidence, and their dismissal of religion and faith, they are actually being taken advantage of because of their faith that they're not willing to admit. And I think that is a shame. And I think if people would accept that science is faith-based on some level, don't get me wrong, it's still very practical to use science. I'm not saying ditch science, you know. I'm just saying you shouldn't take something for granted just because the scientists are saying it, because you don't know why the scientists are saying it. And they don't have the evidence. They might have the best guess, and it's worth listening to and considering, but also looking at the other options. But you can't assume that just because a scientist has said something, it is true. And you can't take evidence and assume it represents what people are saying it represents, because there could be a whole bunch of other scientific evidence that isn't being shown to you. You know? Like they could give you 5% the evidence which could show you one thing and then hide the other 95%. And you would still say it's science. They do this with statistics all the time. Everyone does it. It's like take a subsection of something, give it to the people, and it will look like a correlation, or it'll look like a causation when it's not. It's just a correlation, and without the rest of the information, you cannot be sure what's actually going on. Sometimes you can get enough information to be certain, but it's always worth checking, is there more information I can get so that I'm definitely making the best bet possible, right? If you're going to bet on a fight, you want as much information about the fighters as you can so that you can make the best bet. And it's the same with science, it's the same with everything, it's all bets. You could almost say all bets are off, except actually all bets are on, because you're just betting about everything, and then our brains are convincing us that we're not betting and that we actually know this stuff when we don't. I think that's like an evolutionary thing, so that we're not constantly doubting ourselves. Because really, as long as something is working, there's not that much reason to doubt it. But I think, in general, for animals, that's true. But for us, we've reached such a nuanced part of evolution in our thoughts that it's very easy to get that taken advantage of. I think in terms of evolution, on a general level, it's a very positive trait, being able to see the world as objective. But I think with consciousness and the ability to manipulate each other's thoughts, that can be really dangerous. So I thought I'd do this video on faith, and I'll leave it at that. I think there's quite a lot in there. I'm not sure if anyone will watch it or let me know what they think. But if you do, that'd be cool, because I'm always interested in new perspectives, because I'm well aware that I don't have evidence, technically. So I'll leave it at that, and catch you guys later.